and stuff like that. Actually,
Okay.
let me pause. Let me go. Great. Welcome to the podcast, the Masters Alliance podcast Uncut. I'm Herb Perez, and today I'm joined by my good friend. And actually, before I met him, he was one of the most influential men in sport and continues to be. Welcome, Dr. Harvey Schiller.
Thank you. Thanks, Herb.
Well, thanks for coming on. You are by far the most important person that I wanted to have on the podcast because I think you have a lot to share. And I've always looked up to and admired your career, but more importantly, your passion for sport. And it started a long time ago, with a distinguished career in sport. And it started a long time ago with the Southern Eastern Conference and you leading to your current role as CEO of Goal Acquisitions. Oh, shit. I'm going to start over, man. I'm sitting here I messed up everything that I never mess up, but you got me so nervous. So let me start again. All right. Welcome to the Masters Alliance podcast, Uncut, and I'm Herb Perez. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Harvey Schiller, arguably one of the most influential people I know in sport, but more importantly, somebody that I look up to and have had the good fortune to know for many years. Thank you for coming on today, Dr. Schiller. How are you doing?
Doing good. I know we're separated by a few thousand miles, but that's okay.
Well, we're both from the same area. We're both New Yorkers, and we started there. And you managed to stay on the East Coast, although your travels have taken you across the world. But I wanted to start with you have a long and distinguished career in sport and sport management. It started with the Southern Eastern Conference, and it ended up with you as the CEO of Goal Acquisitions. Goal Acquisitions. Fuck, why can't I say that word? I'm
The
killing
hard
myself today.
acquisitions
Acquisitions.
is a hard word,
Not for
especially
me.
when
God damn it. I went to law school.
especially wait a minute, you can't get rid of your New York background. No
All
one in
right.
New York says acquisitions.
No kidding. Shit. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Masters Alliance podcast. I'm Herb Perez, and today we're joined by Dr. Harvey Schiller. And Dr. Schiller is and continues to be one of the most influential people in business and in sport. Thank you for coming in today, Dr. Schiller.
Thank you for having me. You're a great friend, and I appreciate the time together.
Oh, you're too kind. I know you are being kind, but I always appreciated that about you. Listen, you've had a long and distinguished career in sport and sport management, started with the Southern Eastern Conference, and it's led to your current role as CEO of Goal Acquisitions. How have the challenges in sport and the rewards of sport management changed over the years? And what key lessons have you learned along the way?
Oh man, that'll take a couple of weeks to answer. But first, let me go back a little bit. So I actually started to get involved at the higher level of sport when I was in the Air Force at the Air Force Academy. So I was the representative to the NCAA, and I sat on the NCAA executive committee. And that was when you compare the way intercollegiate sports were managed some 30, 40 years ago compared to today, you really can't compare them because of the money that's coming through different ways to not just to the student athlete, but to the programs themselves at the intercollegiate level and at the pro level. I just saw something which showed that the top 20 Olympic athletes that will participate in Paris have a collective income of over $8 billion. Of course, it starts with Ram, who's a golfer who makes anywhere between $200 and $600 million a year. And of course, the basketball players are all in that, soccer players. So the numbers are pretty dramatic in terms of how people are compensated for participating in sports. So the expectations of young people, even at high school, is that they want a piece of the pie. And just getting a championship trophy, as existed when I first started, to be the national champion in wrestling or football or basketball, that doesn't matter anymore. It's all about how much you're going to be compensated. So you have to be what you and I would call a disruptor. You have to be somebody who says, I don't care what happened in the past, we're going forward in a new direction. And I think that's the biggest change that has happened year to year and will continue to change.
I mean, and that's a great point. I remember when I was on the U.S. Olympic Committee Board of Directors, and you were certainly leading it. There was some rumblings about it back then, and the transition certainly has changed it to a great degree. And the unfortunate part, and it was something you reminded me about, was all of that money that allows those young athletes that are in sports that aren't high profile sports comes from those sponsorships. And so as you dilute that and you expand it, does it have an impact upon the services that those young athletes who won't realize those huge paydays get?
Well, I think it already has. The various divisions in intercollegiate sports is a start. So the major conferences, which are the Southeastern Conference, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Big Ten, and the Big 12, you can't really compare their budgets to a Division 2 and 3 school like Georgetown or one of the others. So this last year, the Southeastern Conference distributed about $65 million to each school. For schools like Mississippi State and Mississippi, that's all they need to spend. But I think the future is going to hold, if a student athlete is making several $1 million a year, I think the school is going to expect to get a piece of that. Maybe instead of giving whatever they do in terms of free medical care and other things, maybe there's another way for the school to realize some of the compensation that the individual student athlete has. But you know better than me, there's no such word as amateurism anymore. I mean, that has disappeared in the major sport events that we think about. In today's news, one of my previous jobs was working at Turner Broadcasting, and when I was there, we had the NBA on two of our networks, TNT and TBS. Yesterday, the NBA said they weren't going to expect the bid to match on the part of what now is Discovery, because they wanted to have a streaming distribution with Amazon. So the technical parts have changed things in such a way that the realization is that people are not watching traditional television. They want something that's handheld. And if it's handheld, it has to be some level of streaming. So you can watch your Amazon or Prime or anything like that, no matter where you are. You can, unless it's geo-gated, and you're in Europe or something like that. So I think that the way people negotiate now is different than the way they negotiated in the past, because they're going to have to be aware of new technology. They're going to have to be aware of artificial intelligence. If you're a coach, you're going to depend upon artificial intelligence for your play calling. As an individual athlete, I think you think about your sport. You're going to overanalyze your opponent to find the weak points and against your strengths. And you're going to know more about that athlete than they probably know about themselves.
And I think that's a great point. And there are a lot of people saying exactly what you're saying now is, especially business investors, they're saying invest in the small screen. The smaller the screen, the more likely there is for it to be used and be profitable, to be frank. So some of these large movie things and stuff, if they're not shaping them down, and Cobra Kai is a great example of that. I've watched the first episode of season 6 with my son, and it's the last season, but I was surprised at, first of all, the level of production, but more importantly, the level of impact it's had. And that was a dead and dying franchise. I tried to play the first one for my kids in my school, and the kids were like, they had no interest. And now this thing has just blown up. But I want to transition for a minute, because we're going to get back to all of that, because I want to talk about your time at the New York Yankee Nets. But you have a distinguished career, which included Vietnam and flying multiple sorties over that. And then you have the Distinguished Flying Cross, and it was certainly one of the most impressive things about your resume. How did your military experience shape your leadership style and your approach to decision-making in the sports world?
Complex question, complex answer. One of the things that you don't realize at the time, but when you're in a combat situation, you have a chance to test your courage under fire. And I think that's a gift. So that when you're in a very stressful situation, that inherent part of courage that's part of you comes to play. And I think that you are not really intimidated by the other side that's negotiating or that's testing you or whatever they're doing, and you try to think of ways to go around it. Now, I'll give you a small example. When we were in Barcelona, one of the track and field athletes for the United States, when they were on the victory stand, put on a cap from an NFL franchise that they were drafted to. So it was an embarrassing situation when the flag is risen and anthem is played, and here this guy sit with an NFL cap on his head. So the coach was apologetic, and he came to see me with the track and field athlete and said how apologetic they were. And I was trying to think of a way to impress the athlete of what they did. And I said, do you speak Spanish? He said, no. I said, well, what are you going to do when you live in Spain? He says, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're not getting your passport back. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you embarrassed the United States. So you gave me a passport when you got here. I don't think I should give it back to you. Of course, the conversation ended in a hurry. The point I'm making is I was thinking at the time that here, years before, I was defending the flag. And at this particular point, here was somebody embarrassing it. And my position was that you had to think of yourself not just as an athlete who won a medal, but as somebody who represented the United States in the flag. That
And I
makes
think
any
that,
sense.
yeah, no, it does. And it was something that I remembered certainly about our interactions and in the large group interactions you always had with us as Olympic team members. And on the way out, literally on the opening of us leaving to go to Spain, there were the opening conversations which reminded us that we were representatives of the United States. We shouldn't embarrass ourselves. And then secondly, listen, most of us were going to just come home with the warm-ups and the memories. So take time to relish that and enjoy it. And I think that I recount those stories to the people that I meet now. And I've certainly been privy to some of your leadership styles throughout the years. And I thought you always did that. I thought you always found a way to make it personal for that particular situation and make it, more importantly, impactful. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
I appreciate it. I think, people have different expectations now. So what would you do today? If I was in the position of the CEO of the Olympic Committee in Paris and somebody did something really embarrassing on the victory stand? I'm not sure how I would react at this point, because we tend to be more tolerant of behavior of our people. And, the various protests that go on across the nation, especially now with what's going on in the Middle East, I don't know. My position probably would be let it ride and sit on the shoulders of the person who embarrassed themselves and not bring it to a bigger audience.
And I think that makes some sense. And we had talked offline a little bit about this. The times have changed and the expectations, and I think there's some good to that. But I do think there's a value to what I don't want to call it the old school, because I think it's always been. I think there is some value to accountability, civility, and ethics and morals, and I think that I think you have to balance those.
You remember Al Order?
Yes, sir.
And he won 4 gold medals in discus, and he said the first time he made the Olympic team, the most important thing to him was wearing the uniform and marching on the field. And the second time he tried to throw the discus and beat the enemy, who were the East Germans and the Russians. And then he said to me that the third time he made the Olympic team, he said, why don't I just try to throw it as far as I can? Why am I limited by the competition? And I think that's a good story, because I think most of the people that will march and get on the field in Paris are probably thinking how great this is. I'm wearing a uniform. And then it'll take a while before they realize that they're there to perform to their best, whatever that may be. I know you've had that feeling yourself.
it's a great point. And I think that, one of the things that I've always valued about the Olympic experience is there are, and there shouldn't be a division based on politic nationality. And I don't remember feeling that there was when I competed back in 92. And then more importantly, I did want to do the best I could do. And I celebrated the success of others. When I went to the games and I watched virtually any game, if US was in it, of course, I cheered for the US and hoped and wished for the best. But I watched the finals of anything just to see the best be the best they could be. And I think that that's what the Olympics should be about.
But yet, when I speak to athletes, professional, collegiate, or Olympic, they always feel that they could have done better. Even if they've achieved the highest, they've broken a world record. A good example was Dan Jansen. I was with him when he set a world record in speed skating, but it wasn't enough for him. And the problems that some of our swimmers have when they win multiple gold medals, and they're saying there's got to be something more. And maybe it's not athletics, maybe it's something else in their life that they have to achieve.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, I've always looked at the sport as a microcosm of the macrocosm of life. And I think that that's one of the differences between great champions. They're always looking for the next goal. The goal of winning a medal is a medal, and then they look to move. And we've talked about this before. You've mentored some great athletes, and they've gone on to great careers in business and entrepreneurism, whatever it is. And I think that you probably found a quality in those individuals, and then you've worked with, listen, you've worked with Olympians, you've worked with at the NHL, you've worked with the MLB, and I mean, can you share some of your insights into the unique challenges of working with those different levels from amateur and professional sports?
Well, there are a lot of examples, but one of the things that everybody has to understand who's with their professional or amateur athlete, collegiate or Olympian, is that work, as defined, supporting business and whatever it is a different challenge. And I've had many Olympians come to me and say, I want to work at the U.S. Olympic Committee. And I said, tell me about your day. Said, I wake up, I work out, I have breakfast, I take a nap, I work out again, I have lunch, I take a nap. I said, have you ever worked 40 hours a week, having to go to an office, travel an hour to get there, and sit around until 5 o'clock in the afternoon? I said, no. I said, when you can do that for 3 months, I'll hire you. I've never had a single Olympic athlete come back.
Really?
Never.
I didn't know the bar was that low. I could do that.
To you and me, that's simple.
Yeah.
But to someone who's spent their whole life competing and training, it's a different challenge. And there are those who go back and do more schooling, or like law school or business school and others, and understand it all. And when COVID and other challenges occur, they can react to that. But it has to have something. The best basketball players coming out of the college who don't get drafted by the NBA don't know what to do. They have to be mentored in some way. They have to be helped along. They're going to meet new challenges. And I just finished spending the weekend at the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. These are some of the greatest athletes in the history of sport. Now, some get jobs in broadcasting, but some are always looking, what can I do? I'm 40 something years old, the young ones. I can't throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball anymore. As Goose College said to me on Saturday, he said, the only place I know to go to is the mound. I don't know. When the manager said, go out there, Goose, I went out there, but my walk was between the dugout and the mound. Now you're telling me I have to make a living, or I have to go somewhere else. And believe it or not, that's not so easy for me. So we have to help these people. And there are people who are doing that, are mentoring and supporting And I think the biggest challenge will be to find enough people that can help the individual that's getting the NIL money and is making millions of dollars while they're still an intercollegiate athlete and doesn't make the NBA or the NFL. Yeah, they'll have enough money to live pretty comfortably, but what are they going to do all day?
I think that's it's a profound insight. It's interesting because as an athlete, at least from a mediocre television viewership, sponsorship sport, I realized early on that I wasn't going to be able to use my sport to go be a professional. So as soon as the Olympic Games were over, I came back and did my proper type of education, got into the world, and decided to make a living for myself.
But you live the American dream.
Yeah.
Where you came from and where you've arrived and where tomorrow may be is what America is allowed. That's the house that you live in that America gives you. And I think luckily we see more and more people doing that. But you don't want to be held back by anyone to do that. But and it's just not financial security. I was at a seminar and I heard he said this outwardly. The Surgeon General of the United States said, the best thing you can do to have a happy life is to have relationships. He said, as you age, not having relationships will affect your health as much as smoking 14 or 15 cigarettes a day. So we need that physical interaction that, how many people are working at home now and are not actually speaking to people? They're not getting trained and they are not getting promoted the way they should because they're never in an office environment. And, they're sitting with a laptop at home in a more leisurely type environment. And I think we're going to pay a price for that for a lot of people, or they are going to pay a price for that.
I believe that to be true. I think certainly the kids growing up, my children are fortunate. They go to school, they do sport, they come home, they go and rinse and repeat. So they get a fair amount of, they're not big screen time kids and all that kind of stuff, but that's in part the way we raise them. But I see a lot of children in my business and I see them, the biggest battle parents have is that idea of where they spend their time and how they socialize. And it was exacerbated by COVID and the impact that I see on kids, certainly. And I think that's profound. But I want to transition now to the creation of the Yes Network under your leadership. It was a breaking moment in sport and broadcasting. What inspired you to pursue that venture? And then how do you see the future of sport media evolving in this digital age?
Well, two different questions, but getting back to Yes. So George Steinbrenner of the Yankees was a close friend. And I was working in the cable business with Turner Broadcasting. And I realized that there was not the opportunity for the team to benefit from their large fan base in a direct manner. So when you're in the cable business or even in the streaming business, you have a direct payment system between you and the fan. So when the NBA is on Amazon, you're going to use your credit card to pay Amazon. And in turn, that money is going to be paid as a rights fee to the NBA and others who join in. So I had these conversations with George, and George had a significant offer from Cablevision to buy the team. And I said, that's not your future. Your future is creating two things at the same time. One is a winning franchise, the Yankees, and the other is a winning business. And the winning business is your cable distribution or your television, your viewing distribution that you own. They're two separate entities. I said, it's like owning two apartment houses. One is the team, the other is your cable business. So we went forward and we had to enter into litigation with Cablevision because they had certain rights as regards not just the Yankees, but the Devils and the Nets, basketball, the hockey and basketball teams. And we were able to prevail in the courts, in the arbitration and mediation, and had the right to create our own network. However, who was going to broadcast it? So you had to use a relationship that you had with, at that time, was Time Warner Cable, and said, okay, if we give you exclusivity to Yankee games in the home market, how much would you pay us? How much would you pay a subscriber? And they said somewhere around $2 or $2.25. And I said, okay, if you run the numbers, you're building a multi-billion-dollar company. And that's without advertising or sponsorship or anything else. So it took about a year and a half, a good 2 years, to convince everyone that sat on the board of Yankee Nest that that's the way to go. And now it's a 4-point-something billion business, but it's not owned by the team. It's owned by investors, which include the largest, who is the Steinbrenner family. So I think it prevailed in a good way. However, what you didn't have, and what Turner's losing with the NBA now, is years of a relationship that end. And that's what's happened in the media business. It's a new business. Streaming services like Amazon are direct to consumer, and they're bypassing movie theaters and other things and pay-per-view. And there's a constant income that comes from the number of subscribers that are there. So everyone wants to be in what is a direct-to-consumer business, because you don't want to dilute anything with the middlemen and such. So I hate to think about this. If I had 6 bottles of Coca-Cola, which add up to a gallon in front of you, and I had 6 bottles of water that you can buy anywhere, and I took a gallon of gasoline and broke it up into 6 bottles. So there's a gallon of Coke, a gallon of water, and a gallon of gasoline. Which is the most expensive? The bottled water. The water.
Wow.
How much is, if you paid $1 a bottle for water, it'd be $6 a gallon.
True.
You buy a gallon of gasoline across America, it's anywhere between $3 and $4 a gallon. A Coca-Cola is cheaper than, is more expensive than a gallon of gas. So how much does it cost to make an ounce of Coca-Cola? It costs about a penny. How much does it cost to purify the water? Almost nothing. The most expensive to produce is the gasoline, but it's the cheapest. So, we have 3 commodities that use different elements of energy and cost, but most of the money is spent in marketing. You need to have gasoline. You don't need to have bottled water. And Coca-Cola is just a treat. The average person who drinks Diet Coke is 56 years old. So what do you do if you're in that business? You're trying to create a direct element between the people that are going to buy the water and your company. And that means that you have to appeal to a greater population, like you're trying to do in television with sports. You're selling them water. It's there, it's available for them, cheap to produce. You have a cast of characters. It's not like making movies. Every time you make a movie, you got to pay for talent. That's why reality television does so well. You don't have to pay that much for talent. So in this particular case, we were able to launch the Yes Network with being paid by the cable operator at about $2 a month, a little more than that, per cable subscriber. So if you had 1 million cable subscribers, you actually have more. That's in a given month, you had, over a year, you're going to have well close to $200 million of revenue before you sold your first ad. And of course, you can pay the team a lot more. But when you decide to sell the team, you still own the network. If you sell the network, you still own the team. It was a hard message to get across to team owners, but they all know it now. They all use the Yes Network as an example. The problem is, a lot of them have gone bankrupt now, regional television. And the reason they probably have is that they never paid much attention to the economics. And, they push, you need a dedicated audience that says, I might not watch it, but I have to have it. The Yes Network only gets a couple of 100,000 people watching each game, even though a few million people subscribe to it. So, think about yourself. Think about the things you have to have and the things that you marketed that the people tell you think you need to have. And, that's sort of the history of it.
That's a it's a hard reality of most membership-based businesses. If everybody showed up at a gym that had a membership, they'd have to close it for the fire marshal. So it's
I read where 10%, you probably know this better than me, of people who sign up for gym memberships never go to the gym.
They just want to feel like they don't, the fear of missing out, I think is what they call it.
The majority, during the Jane Fonda days, the majority of people bought VHS exercise videos, never put it in a video machine. The majority.
Yeah, that is true. Well, there's a huge business, as you know, in late night marketing dedicated to the 7-minute abs. They have a joke. They had the same joke about boats, and the best day of your life is when you buy a treadmill. The next best day is when you get rid of it, because it turns into a hanger for clothes.
There are a lot of things. You're right. There are a lot of things that the saying goes: if you didn't have it, you wouldn't need it.
Yeah.
But we're all guilty of playing into the popularity game. So I'm getting off on a tangent here, but help me if you want me to stop. Just say shut up. So there are two things that sell something. One is the quality of it. Try to say, is it the best thing, the best car, the best this, the best that, the best television show? And the second thing that sells is popularity. And popularity is more important than quality. So the different television programs you watch, Kardashians, you wouldn't say that's the best television, but they're more popular than public broadcasting that has some of the best programming. So if your business is training people in different sports, taekwondo, martial sports, or whatever, you want it to be popular. That's how you're going to get them into your gym. That's how you're going to get them to the ability to tutor them. So the popularity is more important. And you know this because you're competing with other gyms that are not worth a damn. People are wasting their money going there, but they're popular. It may be who goes there. It may be the setting. It may be a range of things, how they're treated. I just had a friend meet. He has a investment company. He played football at Air Force, and he was in town for a meeting. And I said, what is the most important perk that you give to your employees? Harvey's thinking childcare, parking, meals. You know what he said? Culture. Who they work with. That's what it is. And that plays into the popularity game. Who you want to play with, who you want to be with, who do you want as a teammate, who do you want as an instructor. Why are they popular?
I think that's true, and it resonates with me. I always joke. For a while, my place where I teach and teach these kids was called Gold Medal, and so people would say, "Well, the reason people come here is because reason you do well is you want a gold medal at the Olympics. And I go, what? I said, watch this. And I would turn around. I go, anybody know why the school is named Gold Medal? And the kids be like, it's better than silver medal, right? Because nobody's coming to silver medal. And so at the end of the day, once they get in the room, it's about the culture and the service and
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
do
yeah, yeah.
and your expectations. And then, I always joke about that. And I said, because the second part of that is I said, if I had won a silver medal or a bronze medal, what would the name of the school be? They go, silver medal. I go, nope, nobody's coming to silver medal. It would have been called Perez Taekwondo. But hey, listen, you're involved in the America's Cup, and you're certainly involved in the International Baseball Federation and the Hall of Fame. And I remember you were president of the IBF, and it demonstrates your passion for a variety of sports, not just one. I mean, how do you balance your personal interest with the demands of your professional roles? And what advice would you give to an aspiring sport executive looking to make their mark in the industry?
First, I'm an easy mark. If you need help, I'm going to help you. So a couple of years ago, the team handball people said we need a president. So for a year or 2 years, I became the president. It wasn't my passion, but they needed leadership. So, if there's something that needs to be fixed, I like that challenge. Nobody engages me when things are running well. That never happened. What happens is we have something that's worthwhile, but it's not going right. It's not right. We need you to help fix it. So that was Yankee Nets. They needed to find a better way to deliver that product to their fans. And that was America's Cup, that had real challenges because every 4 years you get a new game, new rules and everything else. And that's the way it's been with the Olympic Committee or IBF. IBF was trying to get on the Olympic schedule. They will be in Los Angeles, and they were in Beijing. But I think that there's certain people, and I think you're one of them, who know how to fix things. And you're not going to be popular for that, because the odds are you're going to have to end the employment of some people who are not performing. And it's just part of what it takes to fix something. So the Last Dance. Everybody knows it by now. Michael Jordan, the series on ESPN, where he called me a dick, and he called me a dick because I told him he had to wear the Reebok uniform for the award ceremony. I didn't care about him. I cared about the 700 other athletes like you who probably couldn't afford to pay for the warm-up uniform. So it's also interesting that 2 or 3 of those team members after the ceremonies became sponsored by Reebok.
It's first of all, I'm humbled by your kind words, and I'm nowhere. If I had your skill set of doing what you do without getting killed, my wife reminded me of this. She says, "Can I ask you a question?" And this is everything, including the Olympic board and all that. She says, "Is there anything that you've ever been involved in that you've tried to lead or you've led that they haven't killed you or tried to kill you on the way out?" And I said, "No." I said, "But Dr. Schiller, and in part because of your ability and your political acumen, and more importantly, I've learned more today in just listening to you talk about those 2 or 3 topics we've been talking about than I've learned probably in the past year. And I think that that speaks to some of the other things, which includes you've received all these awards for your innovation and your leadership. And just what are the proudest moments of your career? And what are some of the goals you still hope to achieve in sport world or in your personal life?
Well, I think 24 years of service in the Air Force is proud. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of my family. My wife and I have been married over 60 years. I'm proud of the achievements of our children. I like the fact that they're doing better than I ever did, because I think they're better at what they do than I am. I tend to be more mercurial, and they tend to be more understanding. And I think they're smart. That family pride, I think, is always there. So pride to serve as the country in the Air Force, serve in combat. I'm proud of my doctorate degree in chemistry because it tested me in ways that I have never been tested before, in my ability to come up with solutions and analyze things. So, that's 3 or 4 things that you're proud of. I'm proud of all the people that I've had the ability to mentor and where they are today. Charles Davis, you remember Charles?
Yes.
I'll use the black term. He's a black person. So Charles, how did that happen? Now he's a broadcaster on CBS on the NFL. He's been a broadcaster in the NFL and the Golf Channel for over 20 years. So when I was SEC commissioner, I was given a speech at the University of Tennessee. And the athletic director said, I have this very bright guy who'll give you a ride to the airport. And it was Charles. And that 30-minute ride to the airport, I said, you know what? There are better things for you than working as a graduate assistant at Tennessee. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to bring you into the Southeastern Conference. But I didn't have any money to pay him. So I went to Ted Turner and I said, I'd like to create an internship in my office for this gentleman. And at the same time, I want to create internships at minorities at all of my 10 schools at the time. So I said, I need $100,000 a year for the 10 internships. And with pay and everything else, I need $75,000 to hire Charles. He said, okay. Now those 10 people that had internships at the 10 universities, half of them have become athletic directors. And Charles came to me and he worked at the Olympic Committee. And then one day he said, I want to get back in intercollegiate athletics. So he went and he went, and I think he worked at Stanford. And then for a while, when I went to the Olympic Committee, he worked for me there, but he had other jobs as well. He worked at the Disney ESPN section that they have at Disney World in Florida.
Yep.
And that opened the door for him. Yeah, that opened the door for him in broadcasting. So, I never knew one thing about him before, but in a 30-minute conversation, I knew that he was extremely bright and he just needed a little kick somewhere. And I think I'm proud of the several dozen people that I've been able to help that way. Jenny Storms, you remember her?
Sure, of course.
So Jenny now she heads up all the marketing for NBC Sports. Yeah. So there's people like, there are a bunch like, there's you. There's a lot of people that have been able to put successful careers together because it's not about me, it's about them. They have the fortitude, the intelligence, and what people say now, you have to have grit. That's the new word, grit. Work hard at something, keep pounding away, keep grinding to be successful.
You have been influential, and the one thing, and I won't share, our private conversations, but the one thing I've always appreciated about you is your honesty, but more importantly, your willingness to have an ear and have an open door to the people around you and help nurture them. And that's, as I call you often, and even if it's just a casual conversation to check in, then there's other times I call you where it's specific and I need some advice because it's something that I'm working on or thinking about, and your discerning ability to understand what it is with little information and then tell me whether it's valuable and whether I should pursue it, I've always appreciated. But I want to transition now into your philanthropic work. And you established the Harvey and Marcia Schiller Surgical Innovation Center. And it's truly commendable. But how important is it for you to continue to give back to the community? And what motivated you to support the cause like healthcare and education?
Well, I think we all have one of the beauties of being an American is that we believe in philanthropy. And I think that we all have an obligation to give what we can, whether it's to your school, to a movement. But in this particular case, the people that raised money for the medical university, we went to them and said, we'd like to make a donation. Where do you think it would fit? And they said they'd like to create the innovation in surgery. And they hired this surgeon from Pittsburgh, Dr. Killick, who's a heart transplant surgeon. And do I know anything about that? No. But they needed some money to start going. Now they're getting grants from the federal government. They've been able to create some businesses around it. And it's been very, very successful. The most successful part of it, it's been a draw on top surgeons to come to Charleston to work in MUSC because of the Innovation in Surgery Center. So their healthcare is getting better because of the Innovation in Surgery Center. People want to touch that. They want to know what's the latest thing to do in innovation. And sometimes the innovation in surgery is not having surgery. So it's whether you need it, how it's done, and what's the recovery from it. And they've been very, very good at building a very, very talented group of people working hard to support medicine in the area. But yeah, I think you have an obligation to get back to your school and other things as well.
So you've been involved in several, I mean, I've known some of them and I've been privy to some of it, high profile bids for major sporting events, including the Olympics and the America's Cup. What are the key factors to determine the success of those bids or such bids? And what lessons have you learned from both successful and unsuccessful attempts?
Well, you take advantage of a relationship that pre-existed. That's important. People trust you. Trust is an interesting word, but you can't succeed in any of these environments without trust. Are you going to be able to perform and meet the requirements? And then, whether you like it or not, there's value. How much you can pay for something, or how much do you want to get paid for something, which is a moving target for everything. So negotiations. There's a friend of mine who's now passed, Eddie Einhorn, was probably the best negotiator I ever met. And he said, if you think you have power, you have it. If you don't have it. And if you have power and you don't think you have it, you don't have it. So when you go into the negotiations, you have to have people believe that you're going to respond, you're going to perform, and that you're powerful enough that they want to partner with you. They want to be with you. And that's part of it too. It's, like I said earlier, it's the environment that you're in that people want to be part of it. Sometimes it's false. People want to be around professional athletes. And there's a saying, don't get too close to your heroes, because they're not that great.
They're human for sure, right?
They're human for sure.
I mean, I was fortunate. I'd like to believe that I was around and given opportunities at the Olympic level during and post my career in leadership roles that formed me. And you were one of those individuals. And having been around that, and then had the good fortune to sit on a high strategic planning task force as a result of Sandra Baldwin and Marty McNamara with you and some others. To be honest, you had a team of professionals. I used to call them the triad, and you guys ran and negotiated and with the IOC and people like this in a way that no others did. And it was probably the golden years of the Olympic movement, in my opinion. Do you see, and this wasn't a question I had planned on asking, do you see a difference in that period of what I'll call prosperity, both in an athletic sense, because the improvement of the team as a whole was a result of your mandates and the way that we looked at sport and the mission that we created as a result of that, empowered by the Sport Act. And now, what's happening? Do you see a difference in that? Is it just a difference, or is it a better or worse kind of thing?
I don't think it's different. The expansion of the Olympic program. We have break dancing and all sorts of things. May not sit well with a lot of people, but those people given an opportunity to perform. So I think every leader brings something different to the table. Some of the people that are in place now can't do what I did, and I can't do what they do. And that's just part of the game. That you're successful because of who you are. They're successful because of who they are. And events change, people change. Who would have thought they'd have an opening ceremony on the Seine River? I mean, that's sort of crazy stuff. But somebody is unique enough and disruptive enough to say we can do that. And I think the public expects that. They expect better broadcasting, better cameras, better optics, better sound. Some make decisions I probably would not have made, but that's they're reading the public in a different way than I probably did. And I think the timing is such that there's enough younger people like yourself that can make a difference. And the older guys like me are going to have to say night, goodbye.
I don't believe that to be true, but I'll let you say it because it is you and I can't. You are the most interesting. They put that guy in the commercials, the Dos Equis beer commercials, and I think they should have had you because you are definitely that gentleman. Listen, I'm gonna say one other thing about that, and I have one final question because I've kept you for too long. But the Chinese did the boat thing 2 years ago at the Asian Games. So they did the opening ceremony on a river apparently. But and that goes back to who invented the noodles. I'm not sure. Was it the Italians? I'm sure it was the Chinese. But I don't know whether China stole the opening ceremony river boat thing from Paris or vice versa. But great minds create at the same moments. I don't know. Have you had an opportunity? I don't know if it runs into your sphere. Do you know who Rick Rubin is?
No.
Rick Rubin's he's an interesting guy. He was he liked hip hop music apparently, and then he became a guru to all these hip hop artists, but more importantly to artists in general. And he's got this long white beard, and he does yoga and studies Buddhism. But he just wrote a book on creativity, and the only reason I mention it, and I'll send you a copy. It's a good read, but he mentions that creativity is in the air, and it's not a question of an individual creating it. It exists, and the first person to realize it becomes the creator. And I thought that was an interesting thing. And the only reason I mentioned it is the river, the boat thing. But I was surprised to see.
But I would interrupt you there for a moment. I think I can understand what he's saying, but you could say that about a lot of things. I think youth feeds the creativity. So listen to your kids.
Why do you think that is though?
Because you have to think like a child without restriction. We all are pushed into a corner because that's the way we've been nurtured. But your children will come up with your children will come up with the next big idea if you give them the environment to do it, because they're going to think of things that fit into their world, and that's a world that's growing. It's the next world, whatever it is. So, look, when you buy a new car now, I don't care if it's a Mercedes or a Porsche, whatever it is, they don't put a navigation system in it anymore. Why?
iPhone.
Yeah, you're going to put in your Apple. It's going to, because it's cheaper to upload a phone, to keep it relevant with new roads and everything than to do it with a car. So the use of GPS on phones affected the automobile industry. And I'm sure your son, or daughter, whoever it is, can walk into your gym and give you a better idea on how to run it.
Oh, I'm sure. Listen, I don't doubt it. You said something again. Another person I had read early on, and this is certainly after I had an injury and I read his book. It was called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman, And he said something which has stuck with me to this day, and it's about youth. He said, babies succeed and they learn to walk with no one teaching them, because when they fall down, they get back up. They don't judge. They just get back up and they keep going, he said. So when you're learning, he says, learn like a baby, fail, get back up and move on, right? So I've always found that to be kind of a profound quote. But I wanted to ask you one final question, and it was I like these kind of questions. And I'm thankful for you calling me young, because I'm not young. I'm 64 now, and I remember meeting you when I was in my 20s. So, but looking back on your career, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced, and how did you overcome them? And in light of that, if there were any learning moments from it, what advice would you give to others facing similar obstacles in their professional life?
Find somebody that's smarter than you. That's one way to fix things, that has a better insight into how to get there, whether it's business or flying airplanes or against an opponent when you're as a team or an individual. Find someone who's has more insight into it. Take advantage of all the things that are around you in technology, especially now with AI. Don't forget that. And be sensitive to human needs. When the elder Bush, he won like the World Sportsman Award, and I gave it to him years ago before he died. I walked up to him and said, "You were the president of the United States. What would you do differently now that you're not the president?" He said, "I would spend more time taking care of human needs." So all of us should be thinking about that when we're with people, stopping to help someone who may need help. And I don't mean necessarily someone to cross the street. I mean, help them with a job, or help them with something in their career, or nurture them in some way. Or there was just an argument which was made public. It was somebody who was pro-Palestinian talking with somebody who was pro-Israel. And the pro-Palestinian, who believed in Hamas, said, "This thing that the Israelis are doing, where they're bombing innocent people, America doesn't do that." And the individual said, "Well, if you go back in history, we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki and killed 100,000 people. We firebombed Dresden in Germany, and we firebombed Tokyo." It's not an excuse. It's just that history may repeat itself. I'm not trying to take either side here, but we're not, as America, we're not innocent of everything, but we're better at it than we were before. And we allow peaceful protests. So I think, and I circled around your question, but I think finding people smarter than you, using them, taking advantage of everything that you can, and stepping back and saying, "Am I doing it the right way?" I tend to be, compared to my son, he's a better marketer than me because I'm more mercurial. I could say to someone in a sponsorship, "Are you going to do the goddamn deal or not?" And Derek will walk around and say, "Here's the reasons why you should do the deal." At the end of it, sometimes I succeed and sometimes he succeeds. That's about it.
Well, I've seen that Harvey Schiller. I haven't had the good fortune to see your son, but I think that is I think they're both successful ways, and I unfortunately model myself probably more towards your way. I'm a cut to the chase kind of guy. Well, listen, I want to thank you today for
Thank
taking the
you.
time. No, because it's this is, we share this with young people, and we share this with everybody, and I think this is probably not probably, but definitely one of the best things that I've done and had the opportunity to speak. But thank you again for today.
Well, they know that I love you, and thank you for having me.
Well, I love you, sir.
Be good. Bye.